The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
All systems go.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest is known for her extraordinary psychic abilities, gifts she's had since birth. Her skill set is considered exceptionally rare, encompassing mediumistic abilities, remote viewing, remote touching, clairvoyance, healing, and the profound gift of seeing and communicating with both spirit and spirits in the afterlife. All this plus more. Please welcome a new friend to our show. She's been seen on NBC, ABC, and Fox News. Please welcome Gloria Hass. Gloria, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to have you on.
Thank you, Diego. It's great to be here.
Oh, no, it is really great on my side because I've been following you for a little while now, and I believe I first started following you on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, I wonder if she would like to do my show because I went to your site and I found so many things I would love to talk to you about. So here you are, and I'm happy to have you on. Right off the bat, let me start with this question. I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times, so it'll be a million and one. Given that they've had these extraordinary abilities since birth, can you describe to us what it was like growing up with such a unique gift, and how did you first come to understand and then embrace them?
Actually, to me, it was normal. I thought everybody did everything, I thought my parents were weird if they couldn't see that way down in a distance there was a gas station on the left side and my dad was going to run out of gas. I didn't understand all of that. And I couldn't understand, I'm 4 years old. Why doesn't mommy and daddy see it? And, if I had an experience like looking at a UFO with a girlfriend and people hadn't seen one, my parents and my brother thought that I was crazy and out of my mind and stupid and thought I was trying to gain attention. And it wasn't until, I would say probably the last 4 years, I was in my mid-60s, that I learned that not everyone has the same extent of the gifts as I do. And it was like I have one girlfriend say, this is not normal. Not everyone has this ability. And I'm looking at her like, you're kidding. Why? To me, it's just like, why don't they? So for me to actually embrace them, I was in, I'm trying to think. I was in my 50s when I had received the gift that I knew I had received the gift of healing. And I was in church. It was a Pentecostal church. And one of the pastors said, do you speak in tongues? And I said, no. And so he prayed over me for tongues to come down. And also, what I have found out, because no one else speaks that, it's actually a light language. And I have learned that recently. And people said, well, it sounds like Native American Indian, which I don't know. The only foreign language I grew up with was Yiddish. And it doesn't sound like that. And, it's mind-boggling still to me at this time when more things open up. So as a child, I had to suppress everything. And even as an adult, keep it suppressed because I'd be made fun of. And someone said, well, why are people picking on you? Because I'm a female and they believe they can. They see me as the weaker sex. And I know men who have not been picked on by it. Then I also know men who have been made fun of because of their gifts. But I hear more from it from the female gender that, they're being made to feel as if they are less than, and that what they have to contribute is not important.
It's interesting what you're saying there because I can understand a little bit about being made fun of. And, because as a young age, started having my own experiences. Now, I don't have any abilities of any kind. I don't want to mislead you on that, but especially like you're a podcaster as well, and the topics that you cover will sometimes make people feel very uncomfortable. And I think that they use their reasoning behind maybe picking on somebody or kind of making fun of what they do is to hide their own insecurities, or they don't want to accept that maybe they have seen something, but they themselves feel they can't tell anybody because they'll be made fun of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, going along with that train of thought, when people eventually find out what you're really about, people start opening themselves up to you, start asking you questions, and you pretty much know they're going to do it anyway. So, can you give me an instant to where maybe somebody who wasn't completely understanding where you were coming from later down the road opened themselves up to you, and then you were able to reveal things about their lives they didn't know? You don't have to say a name, but sometimes events like that do happen.
Well, I can give you more on my intuitive readings. I had started them when I was in my 20s, and I worked at, this is back east in Towson, Maryland. This, I believe this bookstore is no longer there. And I was married at the time, and my husband introduced me to it. And I was doing several intuitive readings. And this one woman came into me, and I could visually see her beating a small child. And I looked at her, and she wanted to, how do I do this and do that? I said, well, you need to be nice to him. Well, he's horrible to me. I said, well, you're horrible. And I could tell her exactly what had happened. And she actually basically freaked out. I got paid for it. But when she went out, left the room because it's a closed room, the woman said, she's a fake. She doesn't know what she's talking about or anything. And I had that happen quite a few times because I shocked people. We're talking the 1970s, that I'm saying all of this. And I ended up being asked to no longer do readings at the store. And another time, a woman came in and said, what do you see? A young woman, I would say she was, at the time, she was in her 30s, a few years older than what I was at the time. And she said, what path do you see for me? And I could see there was a crossroads. You come to a dead end, you can either go left or right. And I told her, I see you at a dead end in your life. You're at a crossroads. You don't know which way to go. And then I said, you're thinking about committing suicide, aren't you? And she's like, what? And I said, yeah, you are. You have the pills in your purse and your hands. She had her hand in her purse, and she's brought out, and she had to dig for the bottle, and she looked at it, told me what she was going to do. And I said, if you go the other way, you have more opening up for you than if you commit suicide. It's going to take a while. And I explained it of, what will take a while and everything. And she said, we are done with this conversation. Went out. She gave me the money, went out and told the woman that I was a fake and everything. So I learned that early on, that I don't do readings in bookstores, and I'm 98% accurate. There are people I hit the 2% and everything. And actually, I did have one person I did a reading on, and he said, well, he was in a very abusive marriage. And he said, people get out of prison a lot earlier for good behavior. And I could start visualizing his future. And I told him what would be happening. And it ended up happening 16 years down the road. And he came back and said he said, I thought you were full of it until everything just started falling into place.
I'm just sitting here because I'm thinking of the first thing that you said. You kind of blew my mind. I knew that person, you blew their mind. Hopefully they didn't, like you said, they didn't go through with the thing they were supposed to do. And when you're sitting there and you're receiving this information, these downloads, right?
Mm-hmm.
let me use this as a way to try to explain to myself in order to ask the correct question. So, one of the later Superman movies, I'm going to use as an example, where Superman, he's out there in space facing Earth and he's concentrating, but he hears every sound, every communication, every voice on a planet. And then he decides there where to focus on. That's where he's going to go to help. So the reason I brought it up that way is because as I'm seeing that you have all these skills and all these gifts, how does that all sound in your mind? How do you concentrate? Because there's got to be a constant motion, some energy and voices always. Maybe are they going to disrupt your sleep? Can you rest? How does this work?
Well, actually, when I was younger, my antenna was going all the time. I'll wake up in the middle of the night hearing people screaming, crying, I need help. I'm like, what is going on? And I had a difficult time sleeping. And then as I matured, I was able to say, okay, I need sleep here. Can we please just shut the channel off unless it's an absolute emergency? And if I learned that if I start hearing this and people need help, I immediately say a prayer for them. So that has weeded out a lot of the other chatter. And there are times where I get the information in my dreams and everything else. And there's some nights where I still have not as good nights of sleep as others. I could be wide awake after 4 hours of sleep and it's like midnight or 1 a.m. and I'm just like, oh my gosh. Then people want to know why I go to bed at 8, 7 or 8 at night because I'm up so, early the previous day. And there is actually, I have learned that when I was years ago, when I was working on helping a police officer find someone who had their life taken from them and needed to know their whereabouts. From pictures, I could see what happened. And then I asked the spirit, take me, on a journey, what happened? And then I could see it like watching a movie. And I was actually 99% accurate in that whole situation. And because I only receive what I'm supposed to receive. But on this case, it was just like watching a movie. Now, one case I worked on recently, it's up to the spirit to let me know what they want me to know. And I had one spirit tell me, I thought you were full of it. And that's why I didn't give you the information early on. It was like months later, she finally gave me the information. Very sarcastic spirit. So I'm figuring she's was sarcastic when she was walking the face of the earth. And I gave all that information, to the police, and she finally let me know where she was. And I sent that off to the sheriff's department. And it's like, okay, I'm ready to go on. But I remember working on I was working on 2 cases at one time. And the female spirit was more passive, and the male spirit was in a completely different case, was coming in saying, I'm concerned about my family, and just going on and on and on. I contacted the sheriff's department, police department, and let them know. And they said, that's interesting, because then they could tell me, it depends on what state they are in, what latitude they have. Like the county sheriff's department where I live, they don't have a lot of latitude. They cannot even breathe a hint of anything. It's like, thank you very much and goodbye. Where in another county, they have a little more relaxed latitude. And when I worked with the sheriff's office in Minnesota, he let his supervisor know, and she said, you have carte blanche, let her know anything, tell her to see what we can do, because it was a high profile case. So, it all depends. But when the male spirit came through and interrupted, I said, I am talking to so-and-so right now. Can you please wait? No, I cannot wait. So I had to tell the female, I will call you later, call on you later. And she left. So then I wrote down everything that the man was telling me, and I contacted the sheriff's department. And then when I went to call her back, he kept coming back. And I said, I'm severing this communication right now because I really need to speak with her. And he's like, okay. So that's where, that had gone in. They do come in. And I remember recording for my podcast, I was asking the spirits with the dowsing rod, some questions, and all of a sudden it was like a wind pushed my rod when I was talking with the spirit. And I said, you want to speak? Channel through me? And the answer was yes. So then I channeled him and recorded all of that for my podcast. So they will let you know if they are happy, they're unhappy, but know that you cannot hurt them, but they can hurt you. So they need to be treated with respect.
That's absolutely true, especially, and I know we've all seen these paranormal investigators, ghost hunting shows on television, and sometimes their approach to get a reaction out of a spirit is not the best strategy.
I agree. What bothers me is hit the rom pom, let the light go off, move the cat bell, move the cat ball, let's do this. And I saw one, he and his wife totally disrespected the afterlife. And he started going, why are they doing this? I'm at the other end of the house and they're doing this. I thought, you messed with them. They're messing with you in return. You're going to disrespect them and they can do whatever they want. And you can't do anything about it, because if you go to burn down a house that they're in, it's not going to touch them at all, because they no longer have a carbon body for that signature.
Right. I think you'll probably just upsetting them even more, because I mean, not only are you disrespecting their home, but then you're causing destruction, which I think you might even get more activity of the type that you don't really want. And
they will follow you home.
Yes, they will. And touching on your experience with law enforcement, I'm going to go back to that really quick, because when I was growing up in the 70s and then the 80s, it would seem to be a little bit more common in that time. As I've grown older, and I don't know if it's still happening as much as what back then, but is that still a practice that's still welcomed by law enforcement?
Not really. Because I remember when I contacted a sheriff's department, I'm available for this. I received the information that we don't work with psychics. And then they ended up down the road, because the spirit came to me for help, that they ended up working with me. So they gathered all the information. I recorded everything on video and audio and sent it all to them. So they have all of that information. So if it's up to the individual police officer if he wants to work with you or not. And if they totally don't believe in that, they won't work with you. And if they do believe in it, I've had more success that way.
And how long ago was your last involvement with assisting law enforcement in this capacity?
I would probably say last month. So the case, I'm no longer on the case, and everything is over. And I won't know how that ends up unless I see the headlines in the news, if I look at the news.
Right, because they're not going to tell you where they're at during the investigation. But, you did your part, and it's up to them to do what they want to do with that information. Now, you've mentioned something earlier also. And I have it similar, because I also kind of grew up in a Pentecostal church myself. And out of all the churches and denominations out there, that seems to be the most powerful one as far as having supernatural experiences in a place. That would be the place to have it. But I've come to know that it's pretty kind of dry, at least in Christianity, when it comes to the afterlife. There's appointed once for a man to die, after this the judgment. So it's pretty quick. But as you're more and more do your research in paranormal, you're having your own abilities and skill sets. There seems to be an in between somewhere. Um, I, for me, the afterlife is a little unsettling because I don't know. I thought I knew. The older I get, the more I don't know. So, what's if you could help me out with this one? How does the afterlife look like? Because it seems that maybe it's not what I was told it was.
That's the conclusion that I'm coming to, Diego, because I was brought up with, the Free Methodist Church when I was younger in Indiana, the fire and brimstone. And then we went to California, and my parents went to a non-denominational Christian church where everything is what the Bible says. And I even have gone to a Pentecostal church that if it's not in the Bible, it doesn't exist. And I've lost some Christian friends over the fact of what I'm doing now, because I learned firsthand about when my brother died. I said, Lord, where did he go? What was it like? Because I had the medical examiner calling me in the police department where he was living, because my name was in his phone. And I saw they had told me, that it was I said it's probably complications due to diabetes because he didn't take care of his diabetes that well. And that's what the medical examiner concluded. But then when I heard he was not that very nice of a person, and I saw him going down in a black spiral down to the black abyss, and I heard him yell and scream, oh, crap, but that's not the word he used.
Right.
And then he came to me and begged me, please talk to God and have me get out of this place. I said, you put yourself there. I cannot help you. I am not God. You already had your chance. I already gave you the information when you were alive, and you laughed in my face. And at one time, he was going to be a pastor. He went to school. He started going to Christian college for it, but he ended up dropping out for personal reasons that didn't have anything to do with his belief. But then we're talking like it'll be 7 years towards the end of August that my brother passed away. And here we are in 2025. So -7 will tell you how many years he's been gone. 2018, if my math is correct. And earlier this year, I had Ghost Tube Seer on, and because I felt this presence in my bedroom, it woke me up out of my sleep. So I got my phone, turned on Ghost Tube Seer, and then I see a face with food in its mouth with its mouth open. I started laughing. That was my brother. Because we used to play look. We put food in our mouth, chew it up, and go look and go blah. My mom and dad said, you guys are disgusting, but we thought it was funny. So I knew that was my brother. And when I asked the dowsing rods, they said yes. So when I spoke with somebody who comes from an Eastern point of view, not our Western point of view, but said that when you die, they believe that you can atone for your sins and atone for whatever you did on the earth in the spirit realm. And then you can go over to, when they figure it out, they can go over to the part where they can cross over. But he's been here a couple of times goofing around. And I mean, one time was, I think it was him or my guardian angel. I was listening to a book on vampires. I said, I can't do this. It freaked me out. And the next thing you know, it was a big grin with fangs, like the fangs that you could buy and pop in. And I just started laughing. So I'm learning that it's not cut and dry like the people in church say. And I've lost Christian friends. Even pastors won't talk to me anymore because of what I believe. So, if this is the demonic realm, I don't see it. I do have visitations from that realm, and it is completely different than with the afterlife. Does that answer your question?
Oh, more than you can imagine. Yes, ma'am. Well, and this will go also in the vein of the same path that we're talking about here with the afterlife and you able to see into it. What does it look like? Have you ever projected yourself or traveled to that realm and see how it looks like?
Well, I had one girlfriend pass away, and this was, I would say probably over 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Yeah, I was in my early 40s, and she passed away. And she kept denouncing God, that he even was alive or anything. And I asked, where did she go? And I could see hell. And another time I asked, can I see? And before that, I think I was in my 30s when I asked to see what hell looked like. And I was in hell with the red, the firing going on, and there were paths that I could take, and there are other areas that I could not take. And if I were to branch out, then the walkway would disappear in front of me, saying you're not able to go this way. So I do know what that is like. I also know what it's like to travel to heaven, because I had a near death experience, but I wasn't allowed to see into heaven. And then I met a woman I went to church with, and she was from Guatemala. And I asked her, we were talking, and she said, I've seen heaven. Have you? And I said, no. Well, ask to go there. Ask God what it's like. And I remember being at the supper table with Jesus and other people. And I was dressed in Nordic fur. Everything was set out. And other people have their own unique experiences as to what they relate to. So it's not all cookie cutter, and it does, just because it's mine does not mean it has to fit everyone else's. So I was able to see about that. And also, when a pastor friend of mine died in 2020 from COVID, he came. I was grieving. We were close and friends as friendship. And he came to me and said, Gloria, I'm fine. I could just see doves behind him and angels behind him. He said, I am needed, so please let me go so I can move on. He said, I will see you when you come back, when you're on this side.
Wow, very powerful message there. And with these wide range of abilities that you have, and we touch only on a few because there's dozens here that I see. Is there one particular gift that you find most challenging and rewarding to use?
I find them, yes, I do. And people are probably going to laugh because of this, because it's not in my bio. I just found out recently I had frequency healing and had my frequencies done. And I've been chatting with the one healer, and I was telling her about everything, and she wrote, are you a time traveler? And I'm just like, what? Here I'm thinking I'm just having, everybody can do multidimensional travel, which I've done for quite a few years, even since I was a child. And I looked up what it was, and it would be time travel. And I met the description of a time traveler. I see distortions. Also, I remember it's so challenging because I remember this one bus driver before COVID. And I even told one of my girlfriends about it. And he had broken his neck, and he wrote with his arm out when he had to write as a transportation driver. And he was telling me his entire story of how he broke his neck. And when I had him 5 years later, well, no, I had him last year, 4 years later, yeah, in 2024, I'm on the bus with him, and I said, I've had you before. He goes, no, ma'am, I've only been with the company for 10 months. I didn't believe him, so I called the transportation supervisor. And she said, no, he's a new hire. He hasn't even been here a year. He wasn't there with us, 4 years ago. And I'm just like, what in the world is going on? And I called my girlfriend on the phone and I said, do you remember me telling you about this driver? She said, yeah. I said, well, he wasn't with the company. She said, are we both going crazy? So I ended up having to unpack all of that. And what happened was, at the time, it was like being in a clouded area, and there was a slight distortion before that. So that told me that it was a time travel to the future. And then recently I was in the kitchen and I was about to open up the freezer door and I saw a distortion. And I'm thinking, and then it lasted, I think, for me, 30 seconds. And then it's like, well, where did I go? And another time, I don't know if it was an alien abduction, but I was gone. I checked the clock, looking at the time, and said, well, I need to get this ready. I'm standing at the sink, but I was standing a little more towards the left than I had originally started. And I know that happens with alien abduction, but with time travel, I was in the same place at the same time.
And are there any dangers to this multidimensional traveling or astral projection or anything like that?
I haven't. The part that can be dangerous is I will travel in my sleep. I don't have the control over it. I also enjoyed it at the same time. And I remember one time travel, I was in a different life at this apartment complex, walking my dog, the same dog that I had at the time. She's passed since then. And then these people were after me. And I went in and hid in this one building. And then I had left my keys, forgot my keys inside my apartment. And on this timeline, I don't do that. My keys are always with me and I lock my door. But in that timeline, I left my apartment door open and forgot that the door behind me automatically closed because my dog really had to go out and these people were harassing me. And then there were other people who came to help me. And then all of a sudden, I could use some of my gifts and be able to use my energy with my hand, pushing them out like that to where they would fly back. And some people would say that's demonic, but I don't come from the demonic. I don't worship the devil. But then the manager came out, and she said, do you need help? I said, these guys are bugging me. And they had the police come. Someone had already called on their cell phone. And I said, and I locked myself in the apartment out of the building. Could you please help me? She goes, that's the third time this month you have done that. I'm just like, whoa. I said, I don't remember it. She goes, well, I do. And I have it written down in my office. And that's going to be I'm not giving you any, leeway on the price. I'm going to charge you $25 to get back into the building. And I'm just like, okay. I'm thinking, wow. And here I thought it was a parallel life, but is it really a parallel life? Because different dimensions have different timelines that don't adhere to the linear time we are on. So they might be on a different linear time than we are, or are they really not bound by time because I can go in and out of the multi-dimension in the multiverse?
So if we were to take that in technical standards, you're living multiple lives, but it's just different universes, so to say.
Exactly.
And with that part being said, and you mentioned it earlier a few minutes ago, how do extraterrestrials fit in our spiritual life or in the afterlife? How does it look like on that perspective?
They're not the afterlife. They're not. in the afterlife. Actually, I ran an experiment on my podcast that when the spirit world would come in, they would leave they would just leave the experiment. And I believe that they may be spooked by the afterlife because they can't touch it, they can't feel it, they cannot control it. So it's like us with the afterlife and with extraterrestrials. We might be able to touch it, we might be able to see it, but we cannot control it because they are more advanced than we are.
And they're more, I'm going to use the generic terms with extraterrestrials. They're more flesh and blood biological creatures, so they're not spiritual creatures.
There are some who are spiritual. They do believe in a creator. There are some that they have their own spiritual rituals that they do. And then you have extraterrestrials who are non-human intelligence. So you have, and they're more like the robots. And people call all extraterrestrials non-human intelligence, but there are some who are more robotic that it's like looking at a robot.
And the way they show up in our universe, are they jumping through dimensions? I believe that's the only way to really do it, because due to the being how our universe is completely keeps expanding, our solar system is blasting through space. It just seems that if they were to fly from light years away, is almost like a needle in a haystack. In order to land on Earth with a machine, it's like winning the lottery almost.
They hover in the sky. Some of them are outside our solar system. Some are inside our solar system. Some are above Earth. Some are under the water in their craft. So they're able to do all of this while it may blow our mind, but we also have the technology that it's just slowly being released that
Sure.
They have it. So the government has had the technology for many, many years.
Yeah, and they're not, and there's a lot they're not telling us. Most of that either they were gifted to us or is reverse engineering. But that's a conversation for other episodes for sure. But now for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to learn more about your podcast, what is it called and where can we hear it?
It's on the air with Gloria Hass, the Interdimensional Intuitive. I'm on Spotify, Rumble, and YouTube. And if you go to intuitivegloria.com, there is a link at the top of the page. I'm going to go there real quick instead of trying to do this from memory. At the top of the page, as well as if you scroll down, you'll see blog articles, book corner, intuitive services and products, podcast episodes, and weekly mind sight. If you hit podcast episodes, it will take you to the page and you'll see the current episode that is currently airing. But then all podcast episodes every Tuesday can be viewed and listened to. And I have the words Rumble, Spotify, and YouTube with the direct link going there. So that's the easiest place. And if people want to find me on social media, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. And there are my social media links that you can follow me on. I have Facebook, X, Blue Sky, and Instagram.
When did you start podcasting? How did this all come to be?
I started podcasting before we had Zoom. Actually, that was back, I think, in 2014, 2015. I would belong to some groups, Facebook groups, and meet people and interview them. And they would call on the phone. I would actually record it with an external device and then put it, for 45-minute segments. I would do 90 minutes segment. 90 minutes, I break them up into 2 segments. Or if they just wanted to do one 45-minute segment. And then I would take the audio, edit it, and put it with their picture and go into a movie maker, put it together, and upload it to YouTube.
It's similar to what I do too when I do these episodes, when I download the audio and when I put them on YouTube and Rumble, I'll do kind of like a slideshow thing.
Mm-hmm.
And because not everybody wants to be on camera, and I sure don't. I'm not really for it yet. I've done it a few times. I'm like, I'll stick to radio portion of it, the audio, I mean. But no, I started in 2020 and with a different show and came on to this one because the show I was doing at that time didn't seem as important as I think what I'm doing now, because I get to interview very interesting people like yourself that have a lot of wisdom to share. I think there's so much out there we need to learn about. Then I think shows like yours are very important because there's a lot we don't know, because I kind of think it's being hidden for a reason. But when we do these kind of episodes, I think it might help somebody if they have a question about anything. And I'm sure they go to you directly when they have questions, especially after about the afterlife or remote viewing. You're the person to talk to.
Not always, because there are other people in the paranormal community that, with all of their tricks and stuff, or wanting to be at the top of the hierarchy, who are always more vocal than I am. I'm not out there saying, look at me, look at me. I'm not throwing fireworks up, and I'm not pursuing outside, like going to this place or going to that place, or going to a hotel or a cemetery that is haunted, and doing those shows, because I'm not physically able to. So I present it in a completely different format with, I might just do ghost stories and reading about them, and folklore. And some people don't like it when I've had the afterlife who lives with me, get their reaction. And I have the ghost hunting tools or spirit talker app going. And I have the camera sitting over in the corner, viewing right onto my screen, and do a slideshow of the pictures. And people would rather see all of the move the cat ball, do this, do that. And the only time that I have had this, the afterlife come forward, is I'll have my EMF meter out, and I will be recording it, and they'll speak to me through the app, and then I will ask a question. Of course, it's only yes or no. If it's a yes question, step closer so the lights can come up. If it's no, stay where you are. So that's just asking for clarification. I'm not asking them to jump through hoops and, do a dog and pony show.
Right, because I think that happens way too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we really want these answers, and we definitely touched on it earlier in the episode, is approaching with respect, and because they're not here to do tricks for us. They're just trying to communicate.
Exactly. And they know exactly what's going on in the world. I've had a couple of them get political with me on an episode, and they will bring it up. I don't like what's going on. And even the extraterrestrials won't like what's going on. That came up on an August episode that will be then, and that I've already uploaded. I think it's the August 5th episode. I'm not sure. But they know what's going on. The afterlife knows what's going on. And quite a few of them have come through saying the world surely has changed.
That it has. It's changed just from 10 years ago.
Yes.
And sometimes it feels like we're worse off than when we first started. And sometimes, there seems to be some improvement. Hard to say sometimes, but if it's drawn the attention of spirits and extraterrestrials, I think we need to start paying more attention.
Right. And I agree. And some of the afterlife I've had coming through has been from ancient Rome, ancient Greece, because they'll tell me how they passed, and I will look it up, and it's like, wow, this happened in this country. And I even have that on my podcast episodes, that this is, where they are from, and this is how old they are. And, basically, maybe 1500 CD or 1500 BC, they do come through. They have decided if they crossed over, if they came back, or they decided just to stay here. It's up to them whether they want to cross over or stay. And some are bound by trauma, and they would like to cross over, but some of them would like their remains found, but after 50 years, unless they're mummified, they're not going to have any remains. And some of them are like, okay, I'm ready to cross over now. Help me. And I've had that on recorded on video too.
Wow. And sometimes this happens while you're recording. It's
Yes.
amazing.
Well, I turned my EVP meter on, the EMF meter on ghost hunting tools and spirit talk. And I will say, who's here? You know, some of them don't want to come forward. They don't want to be on video. I'll say I'm recording. And another time I'll say I'm not recording today. And that's when I get more of an answer, you know, to them, you know, from them. So it all depends on who's coming forward and what they want. I even had Wyatt Earp come through.
Oh, you left me on a cliffhanger there. I would love to bring you back later this year and discuss especially the Wyatt Earp thing and what else they're sharing with you, not only just on your show, but in your personal life, because I think that these stories are very interesting and also very important. And please come back on the show anytime, because I'm already excited for the next time you be my guest on this show.
Okay, well, just contact me and say, let's pick up a time and we'll schedule it.
We'll do so, my friend. Thank you.
Let's find out with Diego, the power of Diego Mania.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.